The Villages, Florida. There really is nowhere else in America like this place. I mean, where do we even start to describe this place? Let's start with city planning. Here we're looking at the back of a mobile home that just happens to be overlooking a golf course across a street. A street that has wide margins on the sides for golf carts. If you're on the road, you're looking at the back of the mobile home with only about a 15-foot setback. And let's not forget there's also a sidewalk there for some reason. On one side of the road, you have mobile homes. On the other side of the road, you have a golf course, but you also have another lane for golf carts as well, less than 10 feet away from the lane for golf carts. Looking at the Villages from above, you can see that there's literally golf courses on every corner of this intersection. So the roads go through the golf courses. In the middle, you have a roundabout, but if you go east on this roundabout, it's a gated community, which means even though it's a roundabout, you can't really go in any direction, because if you go in the wrong direction, you'll end up at the entrance to a gated community. With a very elderly population, a lot of people do that. In fact, you can even see where they design an area for you to turn back around and get back into the roundabout if you end up in the wrong entrance. It's like if you could foresee stupidity and plan for it. If you're coming out of this gated community, you can drive your golf cart on the road. But once you enter the main road, if you're on a golf cart, you have to diverge to the right. You can see the pink line leaving the gated community, goes north, then comes back south, goes underneath the highway, south all the way around, south again, and then it goes back around that roundabout. In other words, there are golf cart lanes that do a strange loop around the roundabout. So you have roads for cars and you have roads for golf carts. The roads for golf carts go underneath the roads for vehicles because you can't have golf carts jotting out in front of traffic. Oh, and don't get me wrong, there's places in the Villages where they have that. This just isn't what they did at this particular intersection. In most of these roads, the golf carts are going to parallel the road, but when they get to an intersection, the golf carts have to use the stoplights like vehicle, so the golf cart lanes merge into regular lanes at intersections. Sometimes, not always. It's very random. But most roads are going to have enough space on the side of the road for a golf cart to drive on. But sometimes people in golf carts decide to park their golf carts on the golf cart road, which means if somebody else is coming in a golf cart, then they drive on the vehicle lane. Here's another masterpiece of engineering. It's a roundabout for vehicles, but it also has golf cart lanes on all sides of the highway, and the golf carts have to drive around the roundabout. So if you're in a golf cart and changing direction, you would drive in a tunnel underneath the highway that's specifically for golf carts, and this is kind of what that looks like right here. In general, what has happened in the Villages is that they've provided a community, a master plan community, that has infrastructures and amenities. Now, if you're familiar with Florida, Florida provides neither infrastructure nor amenities to their communities. And this is why the Villages is the fastest growing community in the United States, because it's the only community in Florida that actually has amenities and infrastructure, something that we've talked about on our channel, lacking in most places in Florida. When you actually provide the infrastructure and the amenities, people flock to the place. So while it's a noble concept that definitely seems to work, the execution itself is somewhat of a butcher job, but you get the idea. You created a master plan community that has amenities and has infrastructure, and it's destined to grow uncontrollably. And that's exactly what has happened in the Villages. The Villages has been the fastest growing metropolitan area in the United States year after year, with more growth than anywhere else. You have amenities, you have infrastructure in the state of Florida, something that all the other communities in Florida seem to be lacking. The Villages is also almost exclusively white, at about 96% of the population being white. No one under the age of 19 is allowed to live in the Villages. The Villages is exclusively for people 55 and older. So here you have a community that is predominantly white, predominantly elderly population. This is exactly what they want in Florida. This is what they want to turn Florida into. They've given it all the amenities and all the infrastructures that other communities in Florida do not receive. And thus, they've created the safest and best place to live in Florida, right? That's what they want you to believe. Let's take a look at some of these analytics. Now, the general understanding by the locals here in the villages is that they're the safest community in the world, and that all the crime that happens in their community is people from surrounding communities that come to the villages to commit crime, because an elderly white population would never involve themselves in crime. Again, that's the notion that the locals believe. Now, my personal experience in the villages is that the people are actually very violent, aggressive, and despite the nickname the friendliest town in Florida, my experiences in the villages is that people here are very profiling and discriminatory. Basically, if you're not 65 and older, if you're a young person here, they treat you like garbage. You're constantly being disrespected. People are constantly trying to kick you out of places that they think you're not supposed to be there, even though you have all the right to be there. So it becomes a nightmare of basically these old snobs that think they own the whole place and think that nobody else is allowed to be there except them. And they're very vocal about it. And actually, in my few travels to the villages, I've actually recorded a few incidents of confrontations with people, because people here are just very confrontational. They're very judgmental, they're very confrontational, and they're very argumentative. But let's get into the analytics, not the opinions. The homicide rate in Sumter County has been above the state average roughly since 2017. So something happened in 2017 that made this area more violent. I don't know what that was, but you use your own discretion. Since 2017, this area has been considerably more violent, to the point that the homicide rate in Sumter County right now is higher than the state average and higher than the city of Miami. So by per capita rate, you're more likely to be a victim of a homicide in Sumter County than you are in Miami-Dade County. That should just give you an idea how much violence this area has. And most of the violence seems to be within households. It means individuals who for some reason or another turn violent against their family members and the people of their own households. The drug overdose death rate in Sumter County is about 5 times higher than Miami-Dade County. So we're starting to see how this area, predominantly white and elderly, actually has more homicides and more drug overdoses than the cities in the state that are larger. Now, in the last few years, overwhelmingly the vast majority of the most violent crimes and homicides taking place throughout the entirety of the state of Florida are happening at the hands of the white population. It's an analytical shift that's been happening in the last few years. So it would only make sense that an area like the villages with a predominantly and almost exclusively white population would by default have higher homicide rates, since after all, that's who's committing the homicides in Florida right now. Now, in the last video that I made talking about drug overdoses in the villages, a lot of people said, well, hold on, no, that's because there's elderly people that accidentally take the wrong medication. No, that's a load of crap, okay? That's not that. No, this area has been plagued with drug addiction forever. Central Florida has always had a drug problem. It's almost on par with Appalachia. So don't give me that crap. The Villages is located right in the heart of Central Florida. This area's always had a drug addiction problem. I don't want to hear that garbage. Most people familiar with the state of Florida aren't going to believe that crap. We know what the real problem is. But to summarize the general idea, there's the good Florida and the bad Florida. If you look at deaths from all causes combined, you'll see that the northern half of Florida is just people are dying for all types of reasons. And in the southern part of Florida is the good Florida. Here life expectancies are higher, better life quality. Now, Sumter County is actually on the good side of Florida. It's in the green county. So despite all the problems they're facing with homicides and drug addictions, if you look at all around, like all causes of death, they're with the good Florida. Now, there's good Florida. That's the southern part of the state with all the transplants, which is exactly what the Villages is. And then it's North Florida. North Florida is more natives. Very few transplants move to these counties. And people there are dying from bad health, bad living conditions, bad roads, Just all types of health and living metrics there are so bad that people are just dying at larger propensity. Like that map I just showed you highlights, the northern half of Florida is a complete southern crap hole, and then the southern half of Florida has more transplants, people with more incomes, and people there have higher living expectations. Thus, they have a longer life expectancy because they're living in healthier conditions. They're less likely to die, basically. Now, the villages, Sumter County, falls under the good Florida, the transplant Florida, the growing Florida, the longer life expectancy part of Florida. And again, that's when you combine all metrics of causes of deaths. You have the good part of Florida where people are living long, healthy lives, and you have the part of Florida where people are just dying for all types of different reasons. Now, when it comes to homicides and drug overdoses, Sumter County, it's starting to cross the line. It's pushing towards the bad Florida. But in all the other metrics, they're doing a lot better. And basically, we have a saying in Florida, the further north you go, the more southern it gets. So by the time you get to North Florida, you're basically in the deep south, an area of misery, poverty, bad health. Just everything there will kill you, from the food to the people. We're even starting to see people make documentaries talking about they feel like it's almost designed to kill you, because analytically, some of the metrics of health are so bad in the South that you would almost have to design a place to kill people for it to be so destructive. But that's another topic for another video. The Villages really is on the borderline of the deep South and the transplant South Florida, and it has good qualities of both, and it has bad qualities of both. Now, the claims from the locals that their community's violence is fueled by other people from other places, it's a complete sack of crap. These are some of the most recent murders. You can see they stem from simple arguments at a golf tournament or something, end up being a murder. These people are violent, they're angry, and their homicide rate isn't people from other communities coming to kill people there. It's people from within the community that kill other people within the community over what seem to be completely insignificant matters. Road rage, late to work, so they're rushing to work and they get into an argument, hurt somebody, or even at the golf course. It's ridiculous how petty these murders are and how unnecessary. But like I said, my experiences in the Villages would confirm exactly that the people here, for some reason or another, are just always ready to engage and confront people violently. Now, normally I wouldn't have to elaborate on the specific homicides in an area, but I'm going to do it for the Villages because I know that the locals are going to try to make up some BS story about how it's people from other places that are coming to their community to commit crimes. Let's actually review some of these crimes because I know what the locals are going to say, and I'm not going to allow room for them to get in the comment section and start to spread lies and misinformation. Let's nip it in the butt right now. Hole-in-one leads to 75-year-old's arrest on a manslaughter charge in the Villages. A former prison guard from Coleman was under the influence, driving his car in the wrong direction head-on, causing the death of another person. But that's a manslaughter. That's not a homicide. Well, no, it was a homicide. They downgraded it to manslaughter because this guy apparently had some connections in local government and was able to pull some strings. Well, they quietly downgraded it all the way down to a manslaughter charge. But this dude right here turned a simple fender bender situation into a deadly beating. And that's exactly the way people in the Villages behave. They turn something small and petty into an absolute, out of control, disorderly attack, which many times leads to the death of people. But because it's a white person on a golf course, they always find an explanation to not label it a murder. It's still a homicide, however. Now, murder and homicide are two completely different things. Sometimes we use those terms interchangeably, but they're not. Now, this dude needlessly beat an elderly, frail person to death, believing that he had struck his black Lexus in the parking lot. But he later realized, oh wait, that's not even my car, it's somebody else's. See, he thought that, oh, you hit my car, I'm going to beat you to death. And that's exactly the type of mentality that people here in North Central Florida have, unfortunately. And if you've watched my drive around videos, in almost all these videos, we run into people that are driving and just behaving in this fashion. It's kind of disgusting, actually. We've covered it on our videos extensively, that when we do videos in this North Central part of Florida, that people are just reckless. They kind of endanger other people's lives needlessly in traffic, and they seem like they'll pretty much hurt you for nothing. We've seen countless videos that we've recorded in this area. You guys may remember the video that I had where I had somebody tailgating me, and then a cop pulled the person over for tailgating me. And even after the police car got behind them, they continued to tailgate me, even with the cops chasing them at that point. And that's just the way people are in this part of Florida. I don't. It's a level of self entitlement and disrespect and disregard for other people's lives and well being that people here have. It seems like when people move to this part of Florida, the only thing they care about is themselves. And like this case, they're willing to kill an elderly person, beat them to death over what appeared to be a fender bender, and it wasn't even his car. He just thought, oh, you hit a car? It might have been my car. Let me just go ahead and beat you to death. And that's exactly the way people act in this area. Most of it is completely petty and needless. And these people here are very confrontive. And it's something that is just endemic to this area. The reason why people here are like that, I don't really understand. I believe part of the problem is the fact that it's by the old, for the old. Even within the rules communities, it's written that nobody under 19 can live in this community. They don't want young people here. It's all elderly people. And as a society, that doesn't function. You have people that have basically no families other than their own household. And that really isn't good for mental health. That's my personal opinion. I could be wrong. Now, for the people that say I'm an old people hater, I spend a lot of time with my dad, and I have a lot of personal friends that are elderly. I go fishing with my older friends. I go visit them. We go out to dinner with them. I have a lot of older friends, but these older friends of mine are living healthy, active lifestyles with social lives of people of all ages. There's a type of seclusion to these individuals that seek to live in the villages where they really just seem to only look out for themselves. And I've done a lot in this region of the state, okay? I'm not unfamiliar with this region. I've been up here a lot. And what I've noticed about the people here is that basically 95% of the people in a room are elderly. And then if there's one young person, the old people all look at that person like, you're there to serve us. What can you do for us? What can we get out of you? And it overwhelms those people because everybody's looking to them for help or to be used by them. And it simply isn't healthy. It kind of creates a society where the elderly become entitled to think that everybody has to serve them. And while that is generally how society works, it doesn't if your community is 95% white, 99% elderly, and then who's going to serve you? It's a level of entitlement, and it's a type of society that doesn't function. It just isn't normal. It isn't natural for a town to be nothing but old people. That's not the way human society was intended to be. Human society, the elderly people are supposed to help the parents bring up the grandchildren. Old people in this country just feel like they have no responsibility for anybody. They feel like they have money and they don't need anybody because they have money. And then they forget that as a society, elderly people play an intellectual role in training the next generation, in wisdom that they're supposed to pass on to the next generation. And what these people do by moving to these Gulf-gated communities and isolating themselves with nothing but other elderly people is that they are omitting their responsibility to be mentors to society, and they're creating a society that doesn't even work for themselves. It's unnatural, and it doesn't benefit society what they're doing here in the villages. This isn't the natural role of human beings. This isn't what elderly people are supposed to do. Elderly people are supposed to be there giving wisdom to the next generation. But instead of playing their very necessary role in society by being that source of wisdom to the next generation and by being there for their families, and let me tell you, the elderly people play a very important role in most societies throughout the entire earth. In fact, in most societies throughout the earth, they're respected, they're admired, and they're protected and cared for because they're seen as a source of wisdom. Except here in the United States where they're out in the golf course beating each other to death over a Lexus or a parking spot. Last time we were in Orlando, we're eating at this place called Cilantrio. It's a Puerto Rican restaurant. It's like late at night. They have loud music. It's loud. It's all young people. People are pulling up in Maseratis and Hummers, and it's a young, hip crowd. And I noticed that the Puerto Ricans bring their grandparents with them when they go out partying with their friends. I noticed this also in Kissimmee. I was in Kissimmee. You guys know Kissimmee has like that main street with all the restaurants and bars. And you'll notice that the young, hip people, I'm talking about kids wearing all the expensive clothes and driving all the fancy cars, when they go party, they bring their grandparents with them to party. And that probably is the reason why they are more mature. They perhaps are less propense to violence in that nightlife scene because they're out having a good time, they're partying, but with them are elderly, mature people who can give them wisdom and protect them and ensure that they have a good time, but at the same time that they don't get hurt. And that's an element that the elderly people bring, a level of wisdom to situations that when you incorporate your elderly people into your community, it makes for a better community. And I have to say my hat off and my respect to the Puerto Rican community, because every time I go to Kissimmee and Orlando, I notice that the young Puerto Ricans, hip, popular kids, bring their grandparents with them on an evening out to party with them. And that's probably why these young people go out there, have a good time, but they don't get involved in some of the things that happen to other young people in other places. It's a healthy, safe nightlife. And the elderly people that are there with their families contribute to making it a better experience for everyone in the community as a whole. I'm not against elderly people. I'm against elderly people who refuse to play their role in society. I'm definitely against those people. I'm for elderly people that recognize the importance that they have to contribute to society. See, elderly people have a responsibility, a moral responsibility to society, that they have the wisdom and they have to be here for us. And we have to open doors for them and take care of them and show them respect and dignity, okay? But that's because they have an important role in giving us the wisdom that we as the next generation need. But when you create places like the villages that close the door to anybody except for old people, now you just have a bunch of old people that are entitled, expecting everybody to serve them, but having nobody around to do it for them. And that's why they end up beating each other upside the head with golf clubs over a parking spot. I don't know where you guys get the notion that I'm against elderly people. I just had my dad, who's in his 70s, spend 10 days sleeping over at my house, cooking for him, making breakfast for him. I love having my family, my elderly people around us. I don't understand where you guys get the notion that I hate elderly people. I don't hate elderly people. I hate elderly people who deny their role in society as being a source of wisdom and guidance for the youth. And this is exactly what the Villages is. It's a bunch of old people who say, well, we're rich, we're white and old, and nobody else is allowed here except for us. We're better than everybody else. Let's see what happens. Well, look at the results. Let's take a look at some more analytics here. But no, I don't hate elderly people. I hate elderly people who refuse to give to society what is due. And I hate everybody who does that. Young people who are lazy. People who are addicted to drugs and aren't out there working, contributing to society. When I interview the homeless people that I think are on drugs, I tell them, hey man, you need to be out there being something better. And I tell the old people that are living like this the same exact thing. Maybe instead of isolating yourself from your family, you should spend these days guiding your family, teaching them, giving them the wisdom they need that you've learned through your life. But apparently that doesn't exist here in the United States. And the deterioration of the American household is detrimental. It's analytically proven that in the United States, families year after year become smaller and smaller, and the smaller your family is, the more propensity you have to homelessness, analytically proven, addiction, analytically proven. The list goes on and on and on. Many of the problems that we're facing as a society today all stem from the abandonment of the family structure. Here's the Villages in Sumter County. Part of the Villages is in Marion County and Lake County as well, but for the most part, most of it is in Sumter County. The Villages is the northeast corner of Sumter County, and there's a few other small communities like Lake Panasoski, aka Lake Pantyhose. There's a few rural small towns in central Sumter County, but they're small and insignificant. And in the southern end of Sumter County is the Green Swamp. There's literally nothing there. So the vast majority of the population center in Sumter County revolves around the area of the Villages. Here is one of those roundabouts that we talked about. You can see there's a roundabout for traffic, but if you look on the sides, You can see there's golf carts going around the outside. And this is really the infrastructure that you have in place in the villages. You have roads for vehicles, and you also have roads for golf carts. Both of these different infrastructures sometimes are combined or separated, but you have an infrastructure for vehicles and you have an infrastructure for golf carts. And then you also have a lot of amenities. You have community centers, golf clubs. You have so many amenities in the villages that other places in Florida just can't compete. Now, the villages is unincorporated, just like Lehigh Acres, Florida. But Lehigh Acres, Florida is about 70% Hispanic and about 20% black. Most people there don't have any type of utilities. Most people are on a well and a septic tank, but here there's all types of infrastructure. It is a master plan community. Despite the fact it's not incorporated as a city, it's still a master plan community, similar to where I live in Lakewood Ranch. And what's interesting is how these communities, despite being unincorporated, are master planned, and they have a lot of infrastructure where other communities in Florida lack the infrastructure despite having significantly large populations. Like Lehigh Acres is literally almost approaching 200,000 people, but they have literally no infrastructure. But when it comes to access to amenities, infrastructure, again, this area is 96% white, and Lehigh Acres is probably like 10% white. So favoritism, they're always going to get with nepotism everything they need in their communities. And other communities, despite having a much more important role, really need infrastructure for basic things like transportation, and they don't get it. But here they get it for recreation. So welcome to the state of Florida, where elderly white community gets all types of infrastructure for recreational purposes. But communities like Lehigh Acres need infrastructure just for basic transportation, and they can't even get that. Not even for transportation. I'm talking for city sewage and city water. Homeownership rates are surprisingly high in this county. But keep in mind, too, that a lot of them have mortgages. And the reason they have a mortgage is because, well, if you're 65 years old and you got a 30-year mortgage, you basically got that money up front. In other words, you're never really going to pay off that mortgage because you're going to live 5 or 10 more years, and it's a 30-year mortgage. So it makes sense, instead of buying the house outright, to get a 30-year mortgage because all your money's still in your pocket. And this allows people that are elderly to have a house that they have a mortgage on. They know they're never going to pay it off, but then they can have their money up front for their day-to-day living needs. So it makes sense at old age not to have a house paid off. A lot of people in the United States believe that once you're older, you want to have a house paid off. But really, most of these elderly people are smart enough to know that when you get to a certain point in life, you actually don't want a property paid off. You want a mortgage, because now you grab all that money and put it in your pocket, and you know you're not going to live 30 years to pay off that mortgage. Now, my wife's grandfather was a banker his entire life, and he explained to me why he did that. And most people that are affluent are going to do that. When you get to a certain point in life, you think that having a house paid off is the ultimate goal, but you realize that actually a lot of people that have money are going to have a mortgage because you're not going to live 30 years. You want to have that money in your pocket for day-to-day living, or ideally in an IRA. A lot of people don't understand that, but that's really the reason why a lot of people here, despite being homeowners, a lot of them still have a mortgage. It's just a smarter way to handle your assets. So let's say somebody's retiring in the villages. They have $1 million net worth. They're going to have about $200,000 tied up in their down payment for the house. They're going to have about, $60,000 or $70,000 liquid, and the rest invested in an IRA or some other types of investment. It's not that they have a mortgage because they haven't been able to get that kind of money yet. They've already had that money, but now they realize in this stage in life, it's better for them to live in a $700,000 house, but not have $700,000 in housing. But if you're young and you're going to live another 30, 40, 50 years, it doesn't make sense to have that mortgage if you can have that mortgage payment go away with the interest rates. Make sense? Poverty rates among the white population are surprisingly higher than the black and Hispanic population. Now that's an interesting concept right there. You still have a lot of mobile home parks and poor rural areas that are white in this county, but most blacks and Hispanics that are moving here to live that golfing lifestyle, so they're affluent. but not everybody who's white that lives here is living that golf lifestyle. But poor blacks and Hispanics are not going to go be poor and black in rural Sumter County. They're going to do that somewhere else. Thus, that's why the poverty rate for Hispanics and blacks is among some of the lowest in the state of Florida here. It's kind of an interesting concept, but that's the way that works. Also, blacks and Hispanics are going to be of a younger demographic, and there is a lot of need for workers. When you have a vastly elderly population, especially around healthcare, thus, it makes sense that if there are Hispanics and blacks that are younger here, that they would be desperately needed in the labor force, and thus those unemployment rates would be lower, thus the poverty rates would be lower. But then you also have a bunch of poor rural white areas that bring up drastically those rates. So you have, on one hand, the vast majority of white people, about 85% of them are just living the golf lifestyle, like we said, with a mortgage and a $300,000 or $400,000 house. But then you got the other percentage of poor rural Central Florida hicks that are living in a trailer somewhere, talk about these dang rich folks are trying to knock down my trailer to build a golf course. So basically, in the northern side of Sumter County, the villages, you got all these rich old white people that retired in Florida. But in southern Sumter County, you got a bunch of poor rural people, very different demographically. There's a lot of poverty there. The murder rate in Sumter County since 2017 has continued to grow. And I'm afraid with these new laws where you don't need that class anymore, you know, those new laws, new gun laws that we got in the state of Florida, it's going to make it even worse. So I think in the future, Sumter County's homicide rate is actually going to get on par with some of the bad large cities in the country. And it's hard to wrap your head around how that's possible. I mean, but realistically, I mean, it's already worse in Miami. It's not quite as bad as Jacksonville, but it's getting close. So I don't really know why a place like this would have so much homicide. But again, it just seems like unnecessary escalations. And watch this gray car right here. You see that gray car that passed us? They're flying. I mean, they're going way above the speed limit. And they have a baby on board sticker, and there actually was a baby in the car. You'll see the way they're driving through the video. But it just seems like there's just a lot of needless escalations of things in this county. And possibly, I don't really get it, but believe it or not, despite looking like a beautiful suburban area, the homicide rates here are already high, and I believe they're going to get even higher. It doesn't take much to kill an elderly, frail person if you have a golf cart and a golf club, so that seems to be part of the problem. But on top of that, now you got all these loose gun regulations, and you got a bunch of idiots who believe all that rhetoric, and now they're all armed in golf carts. I mean, it's definitely a recipe for disaster. There's no doubt about that. The drug overdose death rate has done the same exact thing as the homicide rate. More guns, more drugs, all of that is killing more people. And analytically now, you're starting to see these rural counties in Central Florida become 5 times more likely to kill you from drugs than a place like Miami, and 30 or 40% more likely to kill you by homicide or murder. So there's definitely some scary things happening in this part of Florida. Like this individual, I got up to 70 miles an hour to keep up with them. They're going about 100 miles an hour with a baby in the back seat. You can see the baby on board sticker. I really don't understand why people in this part of Florida are so crazy. In fact, it says 20 miles per hour up ahead for the roundabout. But people here, they road rage. They drive like they're nuts. They don't care about anybody other than themselves. And imagine you got people going 100 miles an hour with a baby in the back seat on roads that are adjacent to roads with golf carts. All these are just recipes for disaster. And while it's good that they have all this infrastructure, it really hasn't made for a better community. A lot of communities in Florida, like Lehigh Acres and Northport, other areas that are just catching up on the infrastructure, man, they wish that they had the conveniences that these people have in the villages. And yet, despite the fact they have all these comforts and amenities and infrastructure at their disposal, instead of appreciating what they have, they're out there living recklessly. But it's interesting how the state of Florida throws all types of amenities and infrastructure at these elderly people here at the expense of the taxpayers. But for communities like regular working class people, man, they can't get nothing. They really can't. They have to celebrate small things like a bench for the kids at the bus stop. And the reason they give these people everything is because, well, this is what they want the state of Florida to be, old and white. But when you look at the society it's actually created, it doesn't really leave much to desire. Most of Florida is way over 20% foreign-born population. Here, it's less than 6%. So again, they've created a community of nothing but old white people. And they believe that because it's only them, they're better than everybody else. But then you start to look at homicide rates, and that's not true. You start to look at drug overdose death rates, that's not true. And you start to look at just the general happiness of people, like everyday interactions, and they're pretty awful. I mean, it's actually a miserable place. So while aesthetically on the outside it looks beautiful, you got these golf courses and trees, and all the houses are new, all the roads are paved. Aesthetically, it looks beautiful. But you get out and start having interactions with people, and you realize they're actually pretty freaking miserable people living here. Oh, where's the road? Oh, okay. I don't know where I'm going. I'm lost. Oh, okay. I'm lost. I don't know where I'm going. Feel like if I tap my brakes, I'm gonna die. I got no insurance. Tu madre. Your madre. Don't know why. I keep on going and going and don't know why. I keep on going.
Is that electric?
Yes, sir. Just like your golf cart, probably.
Well, you're not faster.
No, it's not that fast. I have no.
I'm trying to scare you. I just.
Oh, you're good. No, you're good. There, man.
Get up there.
Well, tell you what,
People here.
well, I'm a people too. You don't think I'm a people?
People walking.
But I'm
You're a
walking
danger
right
to
now.
them.
They're a danger to me.
No, they ain't.
Yeah, they are.
Get your butt out of here.
What do you call me?
I didn't call you anything.
I'll press charges on you right now.
Go ahead.
I'll lawyer you up so quick you won't believe it, goddamn. Go ahead. Half of them are related to me. But that's the reality of the villages. These people are really miserable. I think in this one day that I spent in the villages, I might have like 10 confrontations with people. These people, when they see that you're not old, they just want to bump heads with you. They want to argue with you. They want to start a fight over nothing. Why are you standing there? Why are you walking there? Why are you in an electric scooter? Why aren't you old? Why aren't you white? These people are just absolutely miserable. It's like they dedicated their lives to doing absolutely nothing, and this is the result. People with too much time on their hands and with nothing significant. They really don't have anything real going on in their lives. A lot of times old people retire and they'll play, I don't know, they might go fishing every day or they might go metal detecting. Like there's still some type of reason to live, but golf is pretty freaking stupid. It doesn't really have any like reward to it. It's a very end of the line hobby, and it creates situations where the people that live here, man, it's like their lives are just completely meaningless. So they're just going around butting heads with people needlessly. But as you can see, that was all one day in the villages. Confrontations left and right. It felt good to leave that place behind. What a miserable freaking place. And then like when you look at a place like Southwest Florida, you got tropical weather, palm trees, coconut trees. You can grow all types of tropical vegetation because after all, the villages, it gets pretty cold up there. You got all these YouTubers, some of them are even realtors that are young people, but they're trying to push the villages on YouTube, It's so sad and pathetic to watch. Let me show you guys, that was the interactions with locals in the villages. Let me show you guys interactions with the locals in other parts of Florida. And granted, not only is the food scene better in a more diverse part of Florida, but so are the quality of people you meet. Let me just show you guys Immokalee. Immokalee is a really poor farming community in South Central Florida. But let me just show you guys what the normal interactions with the locals are when we travel to a place like Immokalee, so you can compare it to what you saw there in the village. So you can understand the quality of people in a normal part of Florida versus the villages. Let's take a look at that.
A pumpkin, but would you eat it if I cooked it?
How would you cook it? ¿Cuánto valen las calabazas?
Calabazas diferentes precios.
Okay. You want a little one?
Yeah.
Una pequeñita.
Tres.
$3. Okay, una calabaza, uno. So we're gonna grab, this is a mamey. We make batido, which is kind of like a milkshake out of this. Cuatro? Okay.
For the whole basket?
Yeah, $4 for the whole basket?
Yeah, let's get it.
Cool. A pumpkin, a mamey, that's $5, $9 so far. Ya tenemos miel. Yeah. All right, grab your stuff, vámonos. Como 20. What I just got here for $12, when I go to Publix and I spend like 20. See, mucho Gatorade, sodas, agua fresca. Eso me gusta mucho. Pero vamos con el tamarindo. Normally, there's a lot of people that come to the Immokalee Farmers Market from Naples, but you know the world situation right now. Sí viene mucha gente de Naples acá, ¿verdad? Sí. Tamarind juice before, it's really awesome. Muy bueno. Jugo de tamarindo. So, if you're in the Naples area, I definitely recommend. I mean, it's not as good as usual here. Most of the people here are really, you know, it's probably 5 to 10% of the capacity, but so with $20, we were able to get.
So for me, any day of the week, if I'm traveling, just enjoying experiences, I would much rather go to a place like Immokalee. Despite the fact it's a poor place, they got good food, happy people. It's really a joy to go and interact with the people in a place like Immokalee or any of these small little country towns in Florida. They got good food, happy people. These master plan communities, and that includes where I live here in Lakewood Ranch, seriously lack authenticity. It's a very bland place that offers culturally very little. And while that might be nice, if you like those environments of clean, safe areas, I live in a master plan community for a lot of reasons, including safety and stuff like that. But overall, it does feel kind of bland. It doesn't exactly feel authentic, and I would personally pick a place that has a little bit more flavor and authenticity, because there's one thing about master plan communities, at least mine's is close to the beach. The village is just nowhere near a beach. It's not great.